Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Data Science Leaders Podcast. I am your host, Dave Cole, and today's guest is Sid Bhattacharya. Sid, how you doing today?
Good, Dave. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's a Friday, so I'm looking forward to a nice weekend and having some fun outdoors. Living with COVID in the last couple of years, it's good for podcasts, but for everything else, it's pretty crappy. So. Looking forward to spending some time outdoors. So today, Sid is the director of healthcare analytics and AI at PwC. He's got over 10 years of experience, primarily focused in the life sciences industry. So today, we're going to be diving pretty deep into the life sciences. I'm going to be doing my best with Sid here to try to extrapolate and make some of the findings and some of the things that he's seen within the life sciences industry. Also, sort of drawing parallels to the world outside of life sciences. But I think, there are some interesting approaches to data science, and there's some interesting things that happen in the life sciences world. So without further ado, let's just dive right in and tell Sid, if you could just tell us a little bit about sort of how you got into the life sciences. And then I also want to know what you think is kind of unique and interesting about the life sciences world, maybe as compared to, outside of life sciences.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dave. I'm an engineer by training. I went to school back in India, and then I came to the US for grad studies in engineering and business. So I've always had an engineering mindset, engineering point of view, and then I joined consulting companies, right? Like I'm right now with PwC, which is a great management consulting practice, and I've always been in the life sciences space. I remember I started way back building systems for sales process optimization back when I had more hair. You can't see me, but I'm bald. So I've always been in life sciences. And being in consulting gives you a very good rounding, right? So I've been in technology. I've helped companies define their R&D strategy, commercial go-to-market strategy, post-merger integration. So I have a broad swath of experience, but I've always been an engineer at heart. Right. And I somehow in 2016 we were doing a strategy for a large pharma life sciences company, and some of the problems they were encountering at that point, to me, coming from an engineering background, was just ripe for AI. Like they were talking about problems of ingesting data, having physicians and clinicians review the data, make interpretations on it. And my mind directly went to, well, AI can do this, right? In 2016, and NLP, some of the machine learning models. So that's how I got started, and that's how I got into AI. And I keep joking that logistic regression has always been around. Of late, it has become fancy AI term, and I'm not complaining. I'm riding the wave, but
sure.
So
yeah. So I mean, I think everyone who's ever been to a doctor's office and sees how much paper they're pushing around. I think the life sciences and the healthcare industry, they're sort of ripe for disruption. What are some of the similarities and or the differences that you see kind of between life sciences and maybe, sort of outside life sciences?
Yeah. So if you look at the use case, the application level, right there, I would say they're very similar. In every company, every industry, people consume data. They try to understand what's in the data, and they try to make decisions based on the data. And then they output the decisions. If you take that basic process, like we work as humans, right? We read stuff, we analyze it, and then we put it up. You have an output. At its core, all use cases are same. But what's difference in life sciences industry versus like a financial services or chemical industry, I have some background working in small projects there, is the nature of data, right? In life sciences, you're dealing with patient-sensitive data. Mm-hmm. And some of the decisions in certain cases can have direct impact on people's lives. So you better be careful about the data, make sure it's manageable. So that's one big difference I would put versus other industries. So you have to be extra careful and sensitive. And then, that also leads to the regulatory aspects. This is one of the most regulated industries in the country. So you have FDA overseeing it, and you have similar governing bodies in other countries. So data and regulations.
And what is the FDA? I sort of know the answer to this question, but how does the FDA sort of impact life sciences companies? Like, where do they sort of intercede into sort of data science projects?
Yeah, FDA has a big interest in data science projects. Like, uh, there are every life science, even before AI became a thing, FDA was always into data sciences. When you run a clinical trials, for example,
Hmm.
data is collected in clinical trials. And then you had a group of biostatisticians in every pharma companies and an excellent group of biostatisticians at the FDA who would analyze the data. So if you think about it, as your drug goes through a clinical trial process, what you're collecting as a product is the data,
Hmm.
right? And you had to submit that data to the FDA. So the FDA had to have people to analyze, understand the data, and understand the charts and graphs that came out of it. So the FDA was always into data science and bioinformatics, and it has just become more smarter now.
And what are they looking for? Like, what are they trying to?
Yeah,
Is it is it the patient side, or is it more on the production of drugs? Like, what are some of the things that they have like done to where's their oversight with regards to data science and the life sciences business?
yeah. FDA at its core is interested in making sure that the data science, the outputs that are produced are in a controlled environment. As in,
Hmm.
you make sure that you use data in the right way. You make sure that data has no bias in it. You make sure that the models that you're using are tested. And at the end of the day, there's some human being overseeing the outputs of the model. So they at its core are interested in making sure it's a controlled process and there are safeguards put in place. What they don't want to do is they don't want to have a models learn on their own. Like, we use the term
Right.
continuous learning in the
Yeah. Yeah.
industry. That is something
That's
that
not
they're
going to
not
fly.
comfortable
The
with.
FDA is not going to approve that.
No,
Okay.
no. So yeah,
So human in the loop. Imagine you see, this. That's primarily the
yeah.
type of use case that you see. Clinical trials. So you mentioned biostatisticians. How is a biostatistician different than a statistician who's different than a data scientist?
That's a great question. That's a great question. And I try to explain it to people, and I can talk about biostatisticians would work in regression models, and they would work in computer engineering models. But the simplest way to think about it in my mind is data versus language. Or sorry, numbers versus language. Statisticians, at its core, they're dealing with numbers. That's what they run their models on. That's what they make their predictions on. Modern data scientists, if I may use that term, deal in language.
Hmm.
So they're trying to understand human language. They're trying to understand humans' vision. That's also a type of a language, right? So that's simplest way to define it is numbers versus language. Traditional biostatisticians deal with numbers. Modern computer engineers deal in language.
Right.
Yeah,
And I
and you
imagine
need
there's a
you need
bio
both.
element here there too. Like obviously they have an expertise in biology as well. And
Yeah,
yeah.
and that is core, right? Like the domain expertise, and that's where AI is making such a big impact. If you looked at AI a couple of years ago or a few years ago, you would not understand that. You people treated it initially as an IT project, something that you implement as a technology.
Hmm.
But a big change that I'm seeing in the industry is that people have finally realized that this is extremely domain specific. So to your point, people need to have that biology understanding. They need to have medical understanding to do any work related to AI. And
Yeah.
I'm glad to see that companies realize it now.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of the one role where I mean we talk a lot in the DSL podcast that you as a data scientist need to have like a strong background and understanding the business
Yeah,
and the closer you get to understanding the business, the more sort of strategic you can be seen
right.
in the eyes of your business counterparts. And it's sort of built into the name as a biostatistician, right? You have the
Yeah,
statistical background, but also like you
right,
also
right.
understand the biology, which implies that you understand the nature of
Correct.
the business. So I wonder if like in the future, outside of the role of the industry of life sciences, that there might be more of these hybrid roles. I don't know, just throwing that out there.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. In fact, I would say that's the most important role. If you look at the overall data science AI landscape, you have data engineers, you have traditional data scientists, but the role in the middle, which are the bilinguals, I call them product leaders,
Yeah,
that is the most important role.
yeah,
Like you can get data scientists who are extremely good at data science, very smart people. You can get data engineers who are extremely good at the engineering aspects. But if you don't have someone in the middle connecting the dots, nothing works.
right.
So that is a role that's very important. And that's where I feel the majority of the talent crunch would be. We'll get over the data science talent issue. Data science is being taught at high schools now. So
Right.
in a few
Oh,
years,
yeah.
we'll not have that problem. But we will always have the problem with talent with respect to bilinguals.
Yeah. Bilinguals. I like that. So let's shift gears. Let's talk a little bit about operationalizing AI within within the life sciences industry. Like what sort of tips and tricks do you have there?
Yeah, sure. One of the things that is a little frustrating to me as I work across a lot of life sciences companies, a lot of leaders still think that they can just do an AI project or put like one model into production and declare victory. You can definitely do that, but in my mind, that's a short-term way of thinking. I think of it like if you think back in the day when the internet was just up and coming. Macy's had a website. Every company that we know, all retailers had a website. Just because you had a website did not make you an Amazon, right? And it requires a lot more than just having a project or just having a tool to say I'm able to operationalize data science. In my mind, what are the key ingredients to make it happen? One is the top-down vision, right? You should be able to link metrics across business, data science, and IT to success. Like you cannot just say, I want to do data science. It has to be measurable. You have to have an ROI on your projects. You have to identify the right use cases. The ROI part, I keep going back to it. It is very important that whenever you start an AI project or a data science project, you have the right ROI calculated for it, and you can measure it. The other thing is data strategy. I hear a lot of people talking about the importance of data and how data is messy, and you need to spend years and years getting your data ready. I actually don't believe that's possible. You can never ever get your data ready.
Yeah.
It's a mindset shift where people have to be comfortable working with imperfect, for lack of a better word, dirty data.
Yep.
And releasing products and projects with imperfect data. Like else you can, it's like waiting for Superman. It's never going to happen. So that's another thing when you think of operationalizing data science, having that mindset shift is very important too.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably something in the middle, right? Like you don't want to have just data sitting out in S3 just all over the place willy nilly.
Yeah,
massive data. Like you have to have, But to your point, like if you're looking for sort of perfection, if you're looking for, I don't know, like maybe the feature store is the solution to all your problems, and when everything's just perfect, you're still going to have imperfections there.
Yeah.
And it's sort of how you handle it. So how do you play sort of defense? That probably is a better approach, right, than looking for that perfection.
Yeah, and then going back to what we were discussing, that's where the bilingual role is very important, right? Because if you ask a data scientist, they're never comfortable releasing anything into production till it's 99.999% accurate, right? They have one score.
Yeah.
But that's where you need the bilinguals to make it happen.
Right. Understand tolerance. So talk about ROI, right? In order to compute ROI, maybe do you have a use case or anything that recently you've a project maybe that you worked on? Like what are some tips that you have with regards to measuring ROI? And I'd love to hear if it's specific to your industry.
Yeah. So from an ROI perspective, it's very important. Let me give you an example. I work a lot in the pharma R&D space, and one of the problems that we have in the R&D domain is just the volume and variety of data. You have data coming in from all different sources, and then you have trained nurses, clinicians, and physicians having to review the data, make determinations based on it, and then report it out to the FDA or like an internal governing body. This is most acute in a place called pharmacovigilance or safety case processing. So we did a project back a few years ago, and we did it with multiple companies, and the results were always consistent. We were able to automate the entire process of capturing data, analyzing data, and then reporting on top of it using a combination of AI, NLP, machine learning models, and just simple rules.
Right.
And that resulted in all like from a cycle time, like from an overall timeline reduction perspective, it resulted in 40 to 50% reduction in the timeline that it took versus the old process. And those are huge numbers if you extrapolate it.
Sure. Right? Let me slow you down. What is pharmacovigilance?
Yeah. So pharmacovigilance is every pharma company in the world has this organization. they're accountable for capturing adverse events reported for their drugs. So, if you take drug X and you have a headache, you're not supposed to have an headache. Either you're supposed to be reporting it, or your physician is supposed to be reporting it into the pharma company. And the reports come in through call centers. You can send an email. You can write it on a napkin. They're supposed to take it. It's a fiduciary responsibility. So that's what the group does, and it's a well organized group with extremely talented people. But a lot of the work they were doing was data entry, data capture, data analysis, and what has changed with the advent of AI is that has shifted. Now they're just reviewing the recommendations from a machine and looking at those outputs.
Got it. And so pharmacovigilance, as my guess, has always been around, right? Understanding the adverse impacts of drugs, but these days we're inundated with ads on TV that help that have these long disclaimers that my kids always make fun of. This drug, may cause headaches, fever, even death in some cases.
Yes.
So I have you to blame, for partially for that. So I imagine you're bringing so the data that you get back, right? It sounds like is sort of written down, and that's why NLP makes a lot of sense. Like
it's unstructured.
It's unstructured. This is the symptoms that we're seeing after the this patient took this drug, and that's so it used to be right that I imagine that like a nurse had to sort of read through
exactly
and then look at the symptoms and then like categorize them in some way. Is that right?
Exactly right. And what AI is able to do now, we call it narrow AI, right? I also call it boring and narrow AI. But we are automating slivers of what a human being can do. So as a human, we are good at reading. So you have NLP models that are very good at reading now. As a human, we are good at making basic analysis decisions. So you have machine learning models who can take those inputs from what you have read and make decisions for you. So that's how the process can be automated. And Dave, we are talking about pharmacovigilance, but this is applicable throughout,
sure.
Right? You have other use cases in pharma life sciences in the commercial world, like call center data processing. Like instead of having a call center agent take notes, you can have first of all an audio transcript,
sure.
And then you have a model going in and making these annotations and almost creating a report for you, something that a human had to do.
Yeah.
You have examples in supply chain management. Now, one of the coolest things I came across was one of the large pharma companies, global pharma companies, they're using computer vision for quality analysis. So they have cameras on their production shop floor, and as vials or the pill packs they come out, you have computer vision, the cameras taking pictures to make sure that it's of quality, it's of the same level, the liquid is of the same level, or you have the right number of pills in place. So that's pretty cool, right? Like you have actual machines augmenting the human work.
Right. So all of this is driving efficiency, right? And I mean, unlike the call center sort of example, if the transcript is slightly off or wrong, it's not that big of a deal. But in the world of pharma, if we're somehow miscategorizing or not categorizing a certain symptom, like we certainly don't want that to happen. So that's where the humans come in, and it sounds like you're seeing 40-50% gains. So is that how you're computing ROI? Is it sort of like a pre-post? We look at the world beforehand, we look at the world afterwards, we look at the sort of the time savings. Is there anything else that we should be thinking about?
So in my mind, ROI is calculated in three ways. There are three key parameters. One is cycle time or time, that's we talked about. Second is cost. So typically associated with cycle time savings, cost savings also come into play, and we have seen that anywhere between 40 to 50% range again. And the third thing is quality, consistency of interpretation, making sure something that is auditable, right? We keep talking about explainability in AI and how models need to be explainable. In my experience, a lot of human decisions are also not explainable. But if you have a model in place and that's consistently making that same mistake, you can tie a thread back and say there was something wrong with the training data, or something wrong in the way the model is architected. So that's the third aspect of measuring ROI. It's not quantitative, but quality and compliance is also very important.
Yeah, sure. If you had humans like trying to categorize data, like if you had a single human do it, as long as that person didn't get tired or or what have you,
Right.
like there's gonna be a certain amount of consistency there. But if you have multiple people, even if you have guidelines in place, it's never going to be perfectly consistent,
Never.
right? So
Yep.
that's where NLP can really help. And to your point, even when if you do identify a mistake in your model, like if you fix it, theoretically you can go back and retroactively sort of clean up the data, which is also
Yeah.
a nice, and you can do it at scale.
Yeah.
But it certainly makes sense to me that like the results of these models are always being reviewed by humans in the end, just to
Yeah.
double check. But you probably need, what they're actually doing is just a lot less time than obviously if they were,
Yes. Yes.
without the model in place.
Yeah, the nature of their work has changed, right? From actually having to do the work to reviewing the recommendations or the outputs of a machine and providing feedback. So
Right. So you touched briefly on computer vision and on the factory floor as the drugs are being made. Like what else is, if you look through, what are some trends that you're seeing sort of within the life sciences with regards to data science and AI?
yeah, there are two key things. Like, I'm seeing a lot of investments, a lot of efforts in the drug discovery space, not just clinical trials, around target identification. Like if you look, every major pharma company has made an investment in the tunes of millions of dollars into an AI startup in the last year and a half. You have a plethora of AI startups who are now trying to figure out how to make drug discovery simpler. Like how do you do better protein identification? How do you do some drug simulations, like simulation of trials, simulation of drug interactions? And all pharma companies have joined the bandwagon and they have made investments in AI. So that's another area that I'm seeing a lot of traction in.
So obviously this is the speed up research and development is
Correct.
the bottom
Correct.
line, and sort of narrow the scope so that, when you're actually, before you actually do a trial, you have some idea as to the efficacy of the drug that has
Yep.
been manufactured and created for the trial itself. That's certainly interesting. I mean, I'm curious like why are there multiple startups? Like, are they all trying to solve the same problem, or do they specialize in slightly different things?
It's all of the above, and also there's a lot of money available now.
Sure.
I think I read a report somewhere. I think in 2021 they invested over 10 billion globally in helping drug discovery and development. That's a lot of money available, and every startup has a unique angle, right? So some of them are doing simulation modeling, some of them are doing digital twins, some of them are doing more on the science, trying to figure out how to best sequence a molecule. So that's 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 why it is.
Great. That's fascinating. So let's talk a little bit about the art of doing data science within the life sciences. Like, do you feel like the way that teams are organized? I mean, certainly there's a lot more focus on research and development, and we talk a lot about sort of the operational aspect of data science, but also doing that R&D type work. But the R&D work that's being done within the life sciences industry is actually generating drugs and so on and so forth. So what do you see as being like, what recommendations would you have to a data science leader within the life sciences space in terms of how they're organized and how they do data science?
Yeah, yeah, sure. You need to have what I call the foundations, right? You need to have the right data platform. You need to have solutions that can scale up the work that you do. But the most important part of the recommendation would be around operating model, making sure you have the right talent mix. Many times I see life sciences leaders just saying, "Oh, I have a bunch of data scientists, or I have 50 data scientists, I have 100 data scientists." And in my mind, that's great if you're trying to do proof of concepts or experimentation. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're trying to scale up something, you need a different kind of a talent mix. I call it 50-40-10. 50% of your talent or effort needs to be focused on delivery, needs to be focused on understanding the use case, needs to be focused on change management, doing the ROI. 40% of your talent needs to be focused on the data engineering, the infrastructural elements, making sure that the pipelines work, all of that. And only 10% of your effort should be on data science. So if you're looking to scale
Wow.
it up, 50-40-10 is the mix we would recommend. And oftentimes I see the opposite happening. People think that hiring data scientists, who are absolutely important and amazing people, can help scale up. So that's one thing. And the other aspects is just making sure that you think of this holistically. Just by having one use case or one model in production is not the end of it. You need to make sure people are taken care of. It's a different career path you need for data scientists and data engineers and bilinguals, right? It's not your traditional career path that people have typically defined. So things like that.
The 50, 40, 10, that's a hot take, Sid. I haven't heard that mix. I mean, only 10% data scientists, the 40%.
If you're trying to scale up.
Sure. The 40% as who are data engineers and ML engineers and sort of your infra team, I get that. The 50% on the delivery side, tell me a little bit about like, who are those people? Like, are they some of the bilinguals, as you're saying, or are they like project managers? Like, what are?
It's a combination. So it's project managers, bilinguals, people who understand the ROI of things, people who can do change management. So those are the four key categories, right? Bilinguals, project management, change management, and who understand the ROI of things. That's where majority of the effort is, because else you can build the best models in the world with the best engineering pipelines. If people don't adopt it, it's of no use.
Right.
So if you're looking to scale up AI, if you're looking to put AI in hands of more people, you need to have that 50% effort / talent base to do that.
I'd like to drill into one of those areas, which is the change management aspect. How have you seen the life sciences industry sort of embrace machine learning and AI? It certainly seems like they have. If they're doing, if they invested sort of 10 billion in startups, they've certainly, I don't know. I would have done that 10 years ago, but whatever. That's just me. But what are some of the things that you would recommend to a DSL who's maybe struggling to integrate, data science in a real way?
Yeah, for sure. So in general, like, looking back on when we started in 2016, 2017, and where we see today, people are more comfortable with the notion of AI. They realize Skynet's not happening. It's pretty dumb AI for now. And people realize that it's here to help me. Like it's going to augment my work. It's not, I can do different things. So telling that story is extremely important, because if you just talk about AI in abstract and say, we're going to use AI to automate this process, people will not adopt it. We are humans. Our first instinct is survival. That's how we have, survived for all these eons. So understanding that and making sure folks are able to realize that AI is here to help me augment my work, that's the first step. And I keep going back to this, like, we can have the world's best models trained on the world's best data, foundation in the best engineering. But if people don't adopt it, it's of no use.
Right. And
you will not see your ROI. So it's a big portion of making any AI project, any digital transformation successful.
That makes perfect sense to me. I think using phrasing like, augmenting versus replacing, like stay away from the R word. For sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Like automating, or like just say we're going to augment this process with a couple models here and there just to make everyone's life easier and improve the quality, like you mentioned. I'm going to put you on the spot because with regards to what's going on in our world today, right? So I don't know if you have a perspective on this, but certainly right now there's a lot of discussion going on with regards to the vaccines and COVID. And coming from the life sciences space and knowing how sort of drugs are tested, like what has been your impression with everything that's going on in the world today?
Honestly, I'm like, if you go back to pre-COVID days, and I've been in life sciences all along, people had a very different perception of life sciences, right? Like for good reasons, bad reasons, people did not think very highly of the industry. And that is something that has always troubled me, because I've worked in this space and I can see the passion that people in every single company I work with, I can see the passion that these people have for patients. I can see the passion that they have and the care they take in designing a drug, in testing a drug, in making sure it reaches the right patients. So what COVID has done is it has not only highlighted the potential that American drug companies have in terms of research, but they've also highlighted the fact that they're producing stuff that's helping patients. And this is like, I'm very happy that this has happened through obviously, pandemic is a horrible thing, but people are able to now see life sciences in a different light. and I hope that continues because the passion that people have in designing and delivering these molecules is tremendous.
Yeah,
So
you're taking a very optimistic view. I think, if I were to step back, I think sort of pre-COVID, maybe post-COVID too, like the perception of the life sciences space of pharmaceutical companies is sort of they're all out for the money, right? And
sure.
I think the big challenge there, and what you probably recognize, is that it takes a lot of money and it takes a lot of research to produce these
Yes.
drugs, right? And that's
Yes.
what I think a lot of people don't quite recognize. Yes, once that drug has been made, that's like the tip of the iceberg, right? That's the final result. But there have been years and years and years and thousands and thousands of hours put in and to making this drug. So that's usually why it gets priced the way it is. Now, others, cynics in the audience would say it also has to do with the demand and other things, and that's when it gets a little gnarly. But then. Yeah. You're also painting a very optimistic, and I love it, Sid, a view of how pharmaceutical companies today are being perceived with regards to the vaccine. Because I think I agree with you. Like, I think that if you were to have told me that within the first year of this virus manifesting itself and spreading like it did, that we would have a vaccine, I would have said, that's crazy. But there definitely is, these days, like a lot of skepticism with regards to the vaccine and whether or not it was rushed to market and whether or not it was sort of tested. There's millions and millions and millions of people who have used it, but obviously there are people who have had side effects, right? Who have reported those, and that's going into your pharmacovigilance models and being categorized and so on and so forth. And I think there's some, the cynics out there would say, like, this process was just too quick. And do you believe machine learning played a role in the speed with which this vaccine was manufactured? And so
Absolutely.
there's a new era in terms of that being able to produce these drugs and with regards to time to market.
Absolutely, and this is all information in the public domain.
Right.
One of the things, not just the vaccine. There was a company called Benevolent AI, right? It's a UK based company. In the early days of the pandemic, they used AI to look through their database of publications, and they were able to find a molecule that they thought could help in diminishing the viral load. Mm-hmm. So, and that NIH took that on, and they have completed studies on it. So AI not only helped in delivering some of the vaccines faster, they also helped in identifying some of the medicines in the initial days. And then, based on my firsthand experience, AI played a significant role in automating some of these processes, looking at data that's coming back from the vaccine trial. So instead of having hundreds of people look at it, your AI models go in, do the first layer of cleaning, first layer of standardization, predicting where COVID will be from a location point of view, like where would you find the maximum number of patients to test your drugs. That's another area where AI played a pretty big role. So I know I'm being an optimist, but
I love it. I mean, that's certainly the way I've looked at it is, I think this is something that has been, nothing short of a miracle. I think it's something that,
yes.
We should be celebrating. The statistics are out there in terms of, if you've had the vaccine, you've been fully vaccinated, the likelihood that, you will have to go to the hospital is obviously much lower than those who have not been vaccinated, and the likelihood that you have adverse effects, including death, also much lower.
And the other angle here is, AI, we have never had a COVID pandemic, obviously, right? So the efficacy of it's not that we had AI models pre-trained on this, right? Versus any of the other diseases we see. So despite having that limitations, we have seen AI help.
Yeah.
So if you translate that to any known disease area, the impact would be much higher.
Yeah. And I also think that, there has been a crash course on statistics, I hope, because I have not, in the early days of the pandemic, I'm guessing you were the same. Like, all of us were looking at the number of cases, and then there's a lag in terms of the number of deaths. I mean, there's a lot of parallels, between that data and getting the ground truth and all that other good stuff. Um, and and I think there's a lot of folks like you and I would see like, oh, it's 93% effective and this sort of things, and we recognize that there's a 7% where you still might get COVID or you still might have to go to the hospital, and like each one of those cases where somebody goes to the hospital, if there's a news headline like, oh my gosh, this person was fully vaccinated and went to the hospital, and it's like, well, yeah, the question is whether or not are they part of that 7% or not, right? And I think like, I don't know, I'm sure well, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but when I read articles, I wish the author was a little bit more, better versed in statistics and with the readership as well. But that's why we have this podcast, to help educate the world. Awesome. Well, Sid, on that note, I really appreciate you joining the Data Science Leaders podcast. If people can reach out to you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
I'm on LinkedIn, and I try to post pretty frequently on AI in the life sciences and healthcare industry. So you can follow me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, Sid, you have a great weekend, and thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave. That's great talking to you.